Hello from quarantine. Yep. You move halfway across the country and you get to stay in your house. It's great. Oh well. Oh well, good things are on the horizon. Anyway, so quarantine. It's been very interesting. I've acclimated a little bit. I'm very much the hugging type, so not being able to hug people has been a little bit disappointing, being around people. But anyway, I'm healthy, I'm alive, God is good, my future is unchanged, so there's that. So since I can't really take you out on too many adventures right now, I just thought I'd tell you some really funny stories. So in moving to Reading, there was obviously a small culture shift coming to another part of the country. But in some ways there were things here that were actually very similar to back home. But one of the interesting things is, one of my coworkers who had just been hired on, she says, Oklahoma, isn't that where they have tornadoes? And I was like, oh yeah. And she's like, well, have you ever seen a tornado? And I was like, oh no. And then I realized, and technically speaking, I haven't seen a tornado, but I have had a few tornado experiences. And unfortunately now you folks back home have actually seen some sooner, so this timing of this humor may not be appropriate, but here's my crazy tornado experiences. In 2015, it was a Saturday. I didn't look at the weather a lot back then because I guess I just expected that the customers in the store were always going to just in passing want to talk about the weather, so I kind of knew what the weather was. Except that particular week, the customer base kind of failed me a little bit because I was sitting there on my couch watching a 1928 silent film called Wild Orchids with Greta Garbo, and it takes place in Indonesia somewhere. And again, I'm entranced in this complete other life from my own, and I hear this noise outside and what was that? And so I pause my TV and I go to the door and I open it up and I'm listening and I hear this wailing down the street and I'm like, oh, this is real life. So the tornado sirens were actually blaring, and I was very shaky and nervous because even though I had been to the cellar numerous times in my life, I don't know that I'd ever gone with an actual tornado alarm, a tornado siren. I had only gone because of extra precaution, just there was a tornado watch, and so then, you're there, you're protected. So I end up getting together, I go down to the university and go into Morrison Hall basement, like a lot of other people in the community, and, that was fine. The next week, lying on my couch, watching a 1971 film called The Last Picture Show, which deals with a lot of nostalgia and the falsities of nostalgia, and takes place in the 50s, was shot in black and white at the encouragement of Orson Welles, and again, entranced in a complete other life than my own, had no idea there was bad weather outside, I had no idea what the weather was outside, just assumed it was nice weather. And I hear it, and I go to the door. I'm like, again? So I jumped around, got my clothes on, went back to Morrison Hall. It was absolutely bizarre. Okay, but those kind of pale in comparison to my third story. So 2 years ago, 2018, I was getting ready for work because I opened the store in the morning at 8 o'clock. And so I was at home, I was making my oatmeal, brewing my coffee, and my phone actually had the alarm go off on the phone saying, go take shelter now. So I'm freaking out again, had no idea this was supposed to happen, and I call my boss and I say, what am I supposed to do? And he says, it's in Colbert, which was about 15 minutes south of Durant, and he's like, it's going to skip over us, it won't be an issue. I'm like, oh, okay, no worries, that happens. So I go about making my oatmeal, get my oatmeal done, get my coffee done, and I was about ready to have breakfast, and it goes off again, and I'm really freaking out, and he just told me, he said, whatever you need to do is fine. He said, I don't think it's going to affect us. So I finally decide, you know what, I need to go take shelter. So I go and I'm walking out the door, gonna lock up my door, and I see these two rednecks out in the middle of the parking lot looking up at the sky, and then I hear them say, "Here it comes!" And then I'm like, oh no. So I'm like, I don't know what to do. So I just went back inside, took my oatmeal and my coffee into the bathroom, and just prayed in tongues the entire time. That is all I could do. Now, about a few weeks later, a month later, my friend Jared and I were talking, and my friend Jared got into storm chasing because of me. I was shooting a film in 2014 called Fear that involved a character that was a storm chaser, and I wanted him to be my storm chaser character. So we actually sent him out on some storm chasing adventures with some actual storm chasers. And I remember the very first day that he was going out, he posts on Facebook and he says, "Tyler Slawson, I have no idea how you get me into these things." And he said, hashtag yes, this is vague booking. And I had a friend that had also worked on a film with me back in 2011, and she commented and said, "I have no idea what you're talking about, but I understand completely what you mean." And so it was great. But he ended up really liking storm chasing, and so I actually was able to get good information later on. Now the film ended up falling through 10 days before we were supposed to start shooting, and that's a whole other actually very depressing story. But anyway, so I was talking to Jared a few weeks after this tornado incident, and he said he was a block away at the church, and he said, "Oh yeah," he said, "there really was something stirring above your apartment." And he said it really could have turned into something. So I was like, well, here you go. Just go into the bathroom and praise God. That's all you can do. So yeah. So I've had a few tornado experiences, nothing major. Very, very, very sorry to hear about what happened in Bryan County and in Marshall County as well. So my heart goes out to you. My prayers are there with you right now in my former home. So other things about moving to Redding, obviously there were going to be some transitions as far as I needed to, get my State Farm agent and get, know where the places were that I was going to be frequenting. And I kept asking specifically about the State Farm agent because, got to get this changed over to California. And nobody really had State Farm that I met. And now, granted, obviously I only had a limited amount of people to pull from being new to town. So I went on to the State Farm website. I had like literally 10 agents to pick from in Redding. So then, it's kind of like, well, how do I actually pick a State Farm agent? Back home, you just kind of knew people. I knew Greg Phillips back home, so I went with Greg Phillips. Here I didn't know anybody. So I'm just kind of looking at their resumes on their individual pages and kind of like, okay, that sounds interesting. He sounds like he's got some interest. And so I narrowed it down to about 4 or 5 options. And basically at that point, you really can't go any further. So you're like, they all seem like great. So I just prayed over them and I had peace about this one particular agent. So I go down to Michelle Mark's State Farm and I dealt with the first couple of times with her assistant Karen because she was busy. But then I had to finally talk to Michelle about some things that she would know about. And I think I sat there on what should have been a very quick 20 or 30 minute, meeting. And I ended up sitting there and talking to her for like an hour. And she was like, "Okay, I've got to go. Let's talk again." I'm like, "Okay, no problem." Because she wanted to review my auto policy. So I said, no problem. So I went in the next week. I think I was there at that point for another hour and a half, 2 hours. So she was like, "Well, I got to talk to you again because we got to talk about life insurance and we got to talk about this." "No problem, Michelle. I'll be right back." The next week I go in. I was there for 3 hours. We just get chatting and having a good time. She's great. She has great taste in food and we just have a lot of similarities and she's just great. My boss at work found out about this and obviously was laughing at me as I was laughing at me. And she's like, "Okay, is this lady single, Tyler?" I'm like, "No, she is married." But anyway, it has been an absolute delight to do business with her because she has just been, she just has great energy and it's just tremendous, but it's just kind of crazy. Trailer says, "You have met some of the most interesting people in Redding," and I have to agree. I just really enjoy, the people that cross my path and just learning about very interesting people and getting to know them. So it's really, really great. But yeah, so I'm trying to make the best of quarantine right now, trying to go out for walks in the evenings and, just trying to make the best of things. So yeah, it's good. And my mother sent me a care package. I thought it was great. She sent me some things. She put notes on them like hand sanitizer. She said, "Spreading love, not germs." Love that. And then she sent me some hand cream, and she says, "Use this to relieve some stress. If symptoms persist, grab some chocolate." I love it. So shout out to my mom for making quarantine that much better. So I hope you've enjoyed these quarantine stories. Obviously, we'll be coming to you for the next couple of weeks with them. I don't think California is going to lift their stay-at-home order anytime soon, but you never know. So I'm just going to keep coming to you guys with interesting stories from my life that weren't vlogged, but would have been worth a vlog. So for those of you back in Oklahoma that have been affected by the tornadoes, my heart and my prayers go out to you. For those of you that are struggling during quarantine, definitely empathize with you. Just encourage you to know that tomorrow will be better. Regardless of what it looks like, it can only be better than today. And never to lose hold of that hope that tomorrow will be better. For all of you, take care and sweet dreams.